Okay. Let's see. Um, wow. Crazy. Just crazy. So everything I would say would just seems like nonsense, right? Because normally I just sit in the technicals. I don't look at the mechanicals or the fundamentals. I just don't pay attention. I never saw a need to. Especially, you know, we've had war for like the last, well, my whole life, basically, I think. Yeah, it's hard to say otherwise, right? But we haven't had a war that impacts on a global scale in my lifetime. They're all little wars, isolated events on a global scale. So I don't know, right? But if we look at the technicals, this is my first sign of hope right here. We still got 22 days left, mind you, but this is my first sign of hope right here, the MACD, that we might come out of this in November and we'll start to go up. And that's what I've been hoping. And then everything becomes easier if we start to go up. As long as you're not in a complete scam coin, if you make a bad trade, you can just hold on to that trade for a little while until it becomes profitable and get out right away, or let it ride and hodl it, which I do sometimes, right? So in an up market, everything is much easier. This right now at the bottom, trading right now, is the worst time ever. It's not just crypto, and that's what's worrying, is that all markets across the board are facing a future insecurity, right? And that's what we're looking at right here. So I got a couple lines that make a little more sense on the day, but this is good. I must say it's better than nothing. Doesn't mean it won't go down a little bit, but it means we're out of the long draw, right? It means we're out of the long. Most of the bear trend should now be complete, is what I'm thinking. So go to the week. And our MACD is sort of pointed upward, right? That's getting there. Maybe by November, maybe by, somewhere in November, it'll be wiggling sideways and creeping up. But that means that the low is in, or it is coming very soon. And I think I've said before that I'm expecting a V shape type recovery. So jump to the day. We got this line here, just to remind me. It's 15.5. Not sure how I came up with that, but let's keep that and just slide that over. It's good enough for government work. All right, because this is where I want my V drop to happen before we jump above this line. And actually, I think last time I wanted to raise this line. Well, since then, we've hit that line again. So I definitely want to raise it a little bit. I'm just going to raise it like right there. Right? So I'm really hoping that if it could be a 12,000, it could. It could easily be 12,000. But I'm still hoping for like a 15K bounce, right? Like a V bounce up. And then to start trading above this line and not have to worry about it anymore. Right? Sounds great to me. Sounds great to me. So I've got some major trends here that I wanted to throw in. Right? This one is a 1, 2, 3 on the day. And this one is a much bigger picture trend, which can almost be considered a 1, 2, 3 on the day. It's going to be a 1, 2, 3 no matter what. But are we going to break above it, or are we going to bounce below it? Right? That's the big question. So we've had a lot of time, right? And I can take this and pull this over even further. Yeah, well, it's not going to be perfect no matter what I do. But we can move this around, but we are still in this channel. We had some hopium here, but that was not enough to break. And I can't remember where. Yeah, I mean, I back then, boy. But we're there. We're close. We're either gonna, one of these two trend lines here is gonna hold. That's what I'm thinking right now. I'm thinking that this line right here, that I'm not even sure how I came up with this. Maybe this comes off of the weekly or something, probably a percentage measurement. I have no idea. I can't remember. But that line is valuable to me now, because I think that is I think that's the market go line, right? And definitely it's been a good idea to cost average in here. If you're building up for a hodl, it was definitely a good idea to cost average in here. So yeah, so that's what I'm looking for right here. And our MACD signal lines are much higher now. They could drop, but I don't think we're going to see a big swing down again. If we do, I'm hoping for a V shape, which won't show up very well on the MACD, in my opinion. And just for grins, we'll look at the 4-hour. Right? Same kind of thing. Our MACD on our 4-hour is giving us hope that we're going to push back up to this yellow line and then meet these trends, these two trends that I'm seeing. I'm magically pulling out of my head. So yeah, so that's where I see it. We're getting really close now to a not a make or break, right? So I want to jump to the day, right? So I said here that I don't think we're going to really until we go over this, until we break one of our trends, right? I don't think we're going to really go above this too. Now it was like, yeah, it's like $300 more now, so it's 20.3K on Bitcoin. That's a good number. I like that number. But look at this channel. Take a fairly good look at this channel. Right? That's good. That's sideways. And not all support and not all channels are sideways, right? These trend lines are going to be acting as resistance here. These red lines that the TD sequential's throwing in are going to start acting as support, right? This line is just made up by me. Our trend lines are still flowing in a downward direction, but they could start consolidating and pushing up. This right here just looks like a epic consolidation, and Bitcoin saying, I just don't want to go any lower. We don't see this. I don't see this. Maybe other people do, but I don't see this kind of action on ETH right now. And if ETH breaks this support at 12K, I see no reason why it can't go down to 1,000, or $1,000 in ETH. From just from looking at this chart, and I've been looking at this chart way too much the last couple of days. We go into BNB, and there's nothing holding it up, right? But we do have this consolidation here of the 50 and the 100, right? Which I like, and we don't really have that on ETH yet, right? Which makes me think that consolidation might not happen till down here where it is right now, or possibly a V-type drop and recovery happens at 1,000K. Could still be possible. But let's look at Cake, because Cake's channel is actually insane. And I think I pointed this out. I should have pointed this out before, right? But really, I'll never get this line right again. But really, that's the channel, right? That's Cake's channel. And that is it's a 76% increase. Now, this channel's going up, right? Bitcoin's channel is going sideways. This August 14th right here, this kind of top August 14th right here, yeah, it matches with the kind of top here with Cake. So even if Bitcoin drops, I don't think it's going to go back down to 250. I thought Cake would go down to $2, I think, is what I was saying, right? And I'm terribly wrong on that. That didn't happen. $2 didn't happen. Bitcoin kind of went to where I wanted it to go. ETH went further than I wanted it to go, which just made me happy. BNB did not go as far as I wanted it to go, and Cake definitely did not go as far as I wanted it to go. But this could be because people aren't trading Cake, right? They're not trading the BNB pair. And if we look at the BNB pair with Cake, right, on the day, this is a great sign for Cake. It means that it is gaining its value against BNB again. Because if we pull out to the week, and we just go here, we don't go all the way up here, right? We're not going to go all the way up there. But we go to here, that's 75% that BNB has been gaining on Cake. And that whole 75% could flip. And I have this channel right here because I was swinging BNB and Cake till we got to about here. Then I just kind of, lot of USB, right? So yeah. So what happened with Cake? I guess this is the crypto bright spot. Is I think people are buying Cake and they're dropping it in for a year, right? And maybe not crazy amounts of money in Cake, right? But where is this support, right? Because not all support is horizontal, right? Where is this diagonal support coming from? That's the only thing that I can think of. which is a really good sign for cake. Now, I've talked about how cake's tokenomics are very hard for me to believe in, but the last time that I went through cake and I looked at what the current rates were, let's say I want to buy $500 worth of cake and I want to put it away for 6 months, or I only want to put it away for 3 months. Well, how much interest am I getting at that point, right? And then fully understand your burn penalties on cake, right? So if you've got it locked in for a year, you better know when that's up. You better put that on a calendar, put that in your Android phone, and Google something to remind you the day that happens so that you don't get any penalties for leaving it in there too long or something, right? Um, you should know this. But this is a fairly good sign because we don't see this action on Matic, right? We do see the consolidation, which looks good. I like that, right? It's not as smooth as this. Which one was the one that? Yeah, Matic's looking a bit like BNB to me. So Matic support is a 15% drop in value. Last support. Resistance. MACD. MACD maybe looking good on Matic. Okay. So why am I not like optimistic? Because if this was 2019, I'd be ecstatic right now. I'd be real ecstatic right now. And I should be, but I'm not. And the reason is there are things like Ukraine where I could tell you all kinds of details that maybe you haven't heard. I've no solutions, no solutions. That is, to me, the history behind that whole area, the history behind what Europe has called the Eastern Front goes back like 2,000 years. I mean, it's kind of crazy. The land that Ukraine sits on has been a battleground between Europe and Russia in some form for like 2,000 years. And then they got the Chinese on their other border, right? Russia shares a border with China. It does. Russia shares a border with China, and there's actually a town that there's two towns, one on each side of the border crossing, and the inhabitants of each side are able to just cross the border without being checked. Right? I mean, a foreigner shows up and you're gonna be way out of place, and they'll just stop you. But the traffic going across the border there is not checked by the locals. It's so Russia's not worried about their border with China anymore, or the Mongols, or whatever threat came from there 1,000 years ago. The whole fiasco, and it's such a bad, right? I mean, what's interesting is that Putin was installed. The guy before him chose his successor. right after doing a bunch of shit that he knew his successor didn't like. So now we got bridges blowing up and going into Crimea. None of this is good. Natural gas pipelines blowing up or being sabotaged. None of this is good. It's an international set of players, right? And if you watch James Bond movies, for all that we know, it could be some multi-millionaire with a crazy island that's just, you don't know. I don't know. That's what I mean. Everything's crazy. We have a real economic disaster unfolding. All of these things are strings, right? So another string would be U.S. energy independence, right? European energy independence. This lack of independence affects everything. It affects our ability to make anything. We won't be able to. Well, if we are dependent on solar panels and batteries from China, we will never get the energy needed for high capacity industry. It's just a mathematical equation. So years ago, I got really heavy into what would the supercomputer of the future look like, how dense it would have to be, how much electricity it would need, even if it was super efficient at an atomic level. And it becomes something that, you're looking at, you need multiple suns to start to power this type of this ultimate goal of a supercomputer. And we're nowhere near that. We're nowhere near. We've got an opposition to. I just had a, God bless her, someone that I respect, a kind of mini argument on nuclear power, and she brought up Fukushima, and Fukushima is valid, but I don't think that Fukushima is, even the Japanese, I don't think that they view Fukushima as that much of a, it's a challenge, but I don't think it's that bad. I'm not sure, right? But nuclear energy is important for our future. We're not getting that. We're shutting down oil refineries by way of carbon tax penalties, right? Oil refineries can't get the carbon taxes they need to refine stuff, so they're being shut down. This is shutting down. This is affecting smaller refineries already, which are always the first ones to go, right? The whole carbon tax system. Oh, V-chain. So I heard a rumor that V-chain is being used in a personal carbon tax scheme. I'm going to call it a scheme. By definition, scheme. And this will allow every person to have an allocation of carbon taxes. And if they go over those carbon taxes, then they will have to pay a carbon tax penalty. The government is literally just making up shit to tax us at this point, right? We already are taxed at every value added stage of product delivery, whether it's heat or whether it's ice cream cones. And they have just come up with a new way to tax that. So how will they do that? Well, you have meters, coming into your house, metering water usage, metering electricity usage, metering natural gas usage. So that's the first place to start. It's the easiest place to start. I mean, and they'll tell you, oh, if you have an energy efficient home and you're a mom and you're a family of 6, you might be able to put your carbon credits on the market, right? No, it ends up becoming a dwindling supply in the name of making these credits more expensive on that market, and that just ends up becoming a scheme run by the people that run the carbon tax exchanges. It's really a weird thing to look at, and it's so confusing on the carbon tax stuff, right? Because when you're looking, like, if you look at like Elon Musk, he gets an allocation of carbon taxes, but all his shit's made in China by Chinese sources, right? I don't think Tesla's actually. Doesn't he get a credit? Largest. Anyway, they're trying to. They're trying to. From my understanding, they're trying to hammer that down, right? So that the person that makes the end product has to pay a lot more carbon taxes in order to offset the lack of carbon taxes during the production process. So that economically that's one string in a tapestry right there, is this whole tax system, right? There's a Ray Dalio video that I pointed out about cycles, about governments and currencies, and you know overprinting, right? That these are big cycles that happen over and over again. The creation of a central bank digital currency is those same people wanting to control the next printing of money. They want to maintain their control on the printing of money. That's why Bitcoin is so dangerous to them. That's why places like El Salvador trying to become a Bitcoin and cryptocurrency familiar economy is so dangerous to them, right? Because if you think about, all the people whose money comes, what if the government says to Boeing, and they say to Boeing, you have to pay your employees in our central bank digital currency. And they'll need a central bank digital currency wallet. People will do it. It'll be convenient. People will be like, "Oh yeah, that'll work," right? Hopefully it becomes a convenience. That's the whole point, is but they won't be able to control Bitcoin. They won't be able to control the value of it. They won't be able to control printing it. They barely have a control over who it gets sent to unless they can get their physical hands on the person and the keys in most cases, right? All this could change. But that's another thread, right? That they are planning the next boom and bust cycle. They're planning the next boom and bust cycle. If you were smart, you would do it too, right? So then there's economic investment, right? Now, economic investment is terribly, terribly important, right? I mean, words like gentrification, right? Well, if there's no gentrification, it's despair. It's just despair. It doesn't get better, right? It just doesn't happen. I don't know what to say. It's a bad cycle to get into. But even that, we have the whole defund the police movement that got started is still kind of creeping its way through society. There is no economic investment if there is not law enforcement. It doesn't happen. Stores don't move in, stores don't open. It doesn't happen. Places become wastelands until the whole thing can be bulldozed or it's just completely forgotten about. And we already have plenty of economic examples of this, right? Where law enforcement is kind of broken down and there's no jobs. And so we, I have no solution for that. But that's another thread that's weaving this big bad tapestry that I don't know if Bitcoin, I don't know if nothing I say, if none of this, if this was 2019, I'd be happy as hell. Things would be looking up. Things would be looking good, right? Sunny days ahead. Nothing to do with politics. Hell yeah, we could go lower. Everything could burn. I do keep telling myself, and I've been telling myself this for 35 years easy. Everyone who has predicted the end of the world has one thing in common, and that's they have all been wrong. So if it's the end of the world, if you've got $50, if you're cost averaging in $50 a week, $50 a month, right? And it's the end of the world, $50 is nothing. But if it's not the end of the world, $50 is looking really good 4 or 5 years from now, right? So we'll have to see. It's just our politicians have no real life experience. They have no real life work experience. Very few of them do. I'm I'm not one that thinks that you should be a veteran. I think that it helps, but if you're a veteran, you should have more experience than being a veteran. You should have real work experience, not this made up life pool guard shit or God, I'm sounding like a Trump supporter. But you got to ask yourself, are people going to grow up? Are they going to put serious leaders in? And I could go back through every presidential election backwards and I could tell you exactly why I voted, because I never voted for anybody. If you're voting for someone because, oh, you believe in them, I'm voting against people, and I've voted against people for my reasons, right? I voted against Mitt Romney because Mitt Romney used to be part of a whole institution of offshoring jobs. And that's he didn't make any money by adding value to the process. Quite the opposite, in my opinion. He made all his money by the sheer cost cut of offshoring jobs and moving jobs and being part of the whole globalism that Bitcoin is supposed to help stop on a financial level, right? We have the levels of corporate welfare, right? So we have the CHIP Act, right? It'll be interesting to see when that goes into production, and it'll be interesting to see what the actual final product is, right? What actually comes out of that, because we won't find out. We were promised a lot of stuff about solar around 2008. Our government spent a lot of money and got very, very almost no value. There was a comparison of value between the U.S. solar investment in 2008 to 2010 that compared it to the U.S. investment in training people to work in nail salons. And training people to work in nail salons, and you'll have to look up the statistics on that, was actually a better investment. So, per capita, per dollar, better investment. So, getting your government involved in stuff like this, that's the other thing. Our government is involved in shutting down technology, right? If you go back in time, you can look at stem cell research, right? That was the Bush administration. Those idiots, the last thralls. Stem cell research legislation was the last thralls of the rights control on our government, and that was a long time ago, right? So now we're seeing the pendulum swing. This whole climate change stuff, this whole mandating electric cars by a certain date, when there is a complete hampering by regulation of of the energy industry, I have no solutions, but these problems are pretty easy to see, right? And our government getting involved in this is not a good idea. In technology and software development, we talk about Moore's law. Well, in sociology, we talk about forces against change, right? And what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of threads, right, that make up a big tapestry that all is starting to add up to a force against change, a literal status quo. So I'm not saying you're going to get anything better with a Democrat or anything better with a Republican, because if I go back and I look through history, I don't see any differences. So right now, I mean, so I went through the 60s and I went through the 70s, right? I started with Richard Nixon because everything starts with Richard Nixon. And if you don't believe that, you need to start with Richard Nixon. But Richard Nixon destroyed this economy, and then we overprinted, and then we went through a lot of pain, and we had to get pulled out hard. But we might not be able to, interest rates might not be able to pull us out of the problems that we're seeing, is the problem. We have a globalization breakdown. China is at a tipping point. Asia is at a tipping point. Europe is at a tipping point. The US, the dollar is strong because we have a better chance of weathering this, but the dollar, what goes up, and right now the dollar is going up, we know it's got to come down. And when it does, then what happens, right? Wish I could tell you. Wish I could tell you how long this lasts, right? The first, the first one that I went through, and we're talking about the 70s, and I didn't really go through it, right? I was a kid, but looking back and reading about what was going on and the players that were involved in that kind of energy economic crisis, and just money printing escapades, and they were even using the term transient, right? So back in the 60s and 70s, they were saying, oh, no, 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 this inflation, it's just transient, it's just it'll just straighten itself out real soon, right? Transient, that's what that word means to most people. Didn't happen then. We had to have hardcore stuff. We're like poking, right? We're like poking, and I have no solutions. I can't tell you what they should do. That's not. I do the TA. I stay away from the fundamentals. But all this looks bad. Everything looks bad. Immigration in Europe and in the United States has a tipping point where there is not enough space for people to live. And once again, our government has decided that the way to make it the most profitable for developers is to build luxury condos and have a fraction of those be rent secure, I guess is what they call it. So people with low income can still afford it, but you have to prove that you're low income to move in. But that doesn't solve anything, right? That doesn't solve the problem. We're still not getting affordable housing. If you go back in time, back in history, back to the 60s, you'll see that like the average size house, they called them a little bungalow 2-bedroom house. And that's what people started families in. They didn't start families in 2,000, 3,000 square foot houses. They didn't have 1,000, 1,200 square foot luxury condos, right? Everywhere. It's just not how people lived. But our regulations, there's a lot of places you can't even build a house with less than 2,000 square feet. It's illegal. Can't do it. They'll tear it down. Fine you, tear it down, do something. So all of these things are decades in the making to where we are right now. How do we get out of it? We've got real institutions like, well, the World Economic Forum. If you haven't heard about them, I'm not going to talk about them. We've got the International Monetary Fund. We got WTO. They're back, and they're all weighing in on crypto as if they're experts, as if they have the best interest. I'm not against regulation to a point, but to a point, if it's truly decentralized, then the regulation is in the code, and anybody who dives in should understand it, right? And if it's simple, then more people will dive in. But if it's, so that's the real thing right here, is that there is a global effort to see what they can do to stop cryptocurrency, right? They don't think they can do they don't think they can get rid of the decentralized stuff, and they're probably right. But they can control the centralized stuff, right? They can penalize. There's someone who has a name that they can find and put handcuffs on and make play ball. Let me put it that way. So we won't see much, but before the next boom cycle, we will see all kinds of crazy laws that are trying to apply business practice from the 30s to the cryptocurrency technologies, because you can do a lot more with the blockchain than create a shitcoin named after something rocket, right? There's a lot of things you can do with blockchain. We're just scratching the surface, so it'll be interesting. I'm still in, because so far I've only put in money that I can afford to lose, right? So I'm still in, and I'm waiting for the bottom. All right, that's it. That's it. I like I said, I'm worried about the history of all of this. Every time I sit down, there's something to look into, right, with this. Like, how did we get out of it the last time? How did we really get out of it the last time? What was 2000 and what was 2008 really like, and what was, we're going to bail out all these banks. Oh my God, banks failing. So if you're not paying attention, banks are like, they're kind of not happy. I mean, they're kind of not doing well. And a lot of credit institutions, people were trading large, crazy sums of money, right? And losing it. They were borrowing the money and using that money to trade with, and they were losing it. Amazing. So you need to look into these banks, why they're having problems, why their investments were absolute crap. There's so much bad out there that it's hard to be optimistic about Bitcoin. The history is telling me, I mean, it's screaming at you. This is not 2018. This is not 2019 at all. It's not even 2008. It's not even 2000, right? This is full blown governments fucking shit up doing with. Listen, I don't have a side. I'm an American. I don't have a side in the Ukraine war. I know Ukrainians and I know Russians. And none of them like their leaders. So nobody is thinking anybody is acting like an adult right now. And it'll be interesting to see if adults ever do take over. So, all right, that's my rant. I am done. I'll be watching Bitcoin. I'll be watching Cake, right? Cake, I'm definitely going to be watching here. All right, have a good one.